close your eyes and let's drift back to the overthinking loop, where a thought is never just a thought, but a tiny pebble that somehow becomes a whole avalanche. You've been here before, that mental back alley where your brain says, "Don't worry, I can fix this," and then proceeds to draw 37 flowcharts in the dark. The air in here smells like warm paper and the hum of an old desk lamp. You can almost feel the walls made of sticky notes, all written in your own handwriting, wrapping closer. And here's your cheeky reality check. You probably never learned in school that overthinking is basically mental quicksand with better vocabulary. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me your location and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You start at the top of the loop, innocently enough. Something feels off, maybe a vague discomfort, a loose thread of uncertainty. So you think, I'll just reason my way through this. Seems harmless, right? But each thought branches like a stubborn tree root, curling under the floorboards, poking through places you didn't even know existed. The more you pull at it, the more the knot tightens. Soon, you're not solving the discomfort, you're feeding it gourmet dinners. You know that moment when you try to recall if you locked the door, so you replay the memory. Except instead of clarity, you get a low-budget remake starring doubt and what if. That's the overthinking loop at work. And while you're trying to think your way out of the loop just adds more ramps. Each possibility becomes a new branch to chase, a new corridor to wander. Somewhere in the background, your actual life is on pause, like a movie buffering in bad Wi-Fi. The thing about overthinking is it has excellent timing. It waits until the shower, the grocery store checkout line, or exactly 4 minutes before you fall asleep. That's when it whispers, "Hey, remember that thing from 3 years ago? Yeah, let's unpack it." You can practically hear your own brain dragging in a squeaky whiteboard and asking for markers. But here's the real trap. The more uncomfortable the feeling, the more convinced you are that thinking can make it disappear. It's like trying to put out a grease fire with more grease. You think you're doing something helpful, but you're just giving the flames a proper show. And because the loop feeds on itself, you start mistaking mental noise for progress. Your senses shrink inside the loop. You stop noticing the scent of your coffee, the way sunlight paints stripes on the wall, the background hum of traffic. All your bandwidth is dedicated to running simulations in your head, the kind of simulations where every outcome is worse than the last. You become the sole audience member at a theatre that plays nothing but your own worries on repeat. Every so often, you catch yourself mid-loop and try to just stop thinking about it, which naturally makes you think about it harder. It's the same mental backfire as when someone says, "Don't imagine a pink elephant." Immediately, you're designing its wardrobe. Overthinking loves that. It thrives on your efforts to shut it down, because each attempt feels like more proof that the problem is serious enough to require more thinking. And the worst part? The loop can be disguised as productivity. You might tell yourself you're planning, preparing, problem solving. But deep down, you know you're pacing in circles, like rearranging the chairs in a waiting room where nothing ever happens. Sometimes the loop even gets meta. You start overthinking about overthinking. Why can't I stop thinking? What does that say about me? Am I broken? And congratulations, you've just built a mezzanine level in your mental funhouse. Now, the overthinking loop isn't entirely without charm. It can feel strangely safe in here. No unpredictable moves. just you and your mind, having an intense board meeting. The familiarity becomes a comfort blanket, and that's why breaking the loop feels so unnatural. Your brain has learned to equate thinking more with being in control. But the truth is, thought has diminishing returns past a certain point. It's like microwaving leftovers over and over. The flavor is gone, the texture is gone, and yet you keep pressing reheat because you're convinced one more try will make it fresh again. It never does. You start to notice the toll, the gentle hum of tension in your shoulders, the faint ache behind your eyes, the way time seems to dissolve without you really being present. You realize you've been staring at the same corner of the ceiling for 15 minutes, playing mental chess against yourself. And yet, there's a small part of you, maybe the same part that enjoys scratching mosquito bites, that doesn't want to leave the loop just yet. Overthinking loves to end on cliffhangers. It never fully resolves anything, so there's always a reason to come back later. But in doing so, it steals away the simplicity of just being. And the irony? The moment you stop feeding it, the loop can collapse faster than you expect, like turning off a noisy fan and suddenly realizing how loud it had been. For now, though, you drift in that warm, humming mental space, where thoughts chase thoughts in endless figure eights. You let the edges of the loop soften, not by solving it, but by noticing it, like seeing a mirage for what it is, shimmering, tempting, but not water, just light, playing tricks in the heat. You slide from the overthinking loop straight into its close cousin, the expectation-disappointment cycle. Here, the scenery shifts. The walls are no longer lined with sticky notes, but with movie posters. Each one is a glossy, high-definition scene your mind has secretly directed. How your day will unfold, how that conversation will go, how this year will be the one. You don't consciously remember writing the script, but the casting, lighting, and soundtrack, all you. And then reality strolls in without reading the lines. It always starts quietly. You picture something, maybe as simple as a sunny afternoon walk or a dinner with friends, and you imagine exactly how it will feel. The laughs will land in rhythm. The sunset will paint the sky just so. You might even think of it as visualizing success, which sounds productive. But secretly, you've laid out a track that reality has to follow. And reality, well, reality is more of a freestyle dancer than a disciplined train. Here's the kicker. You never actually tell anyone else about your script. No one got the memo that dessert should arrive in under 10 minutes, or that the meeting should wrap with a neat conclusion that validates your brilliant suggestion. You keep the script folded in your mental back pocket. So when the world inevitably ad-libs, you're left blinking, wondering why everyone missed their cues. The cycle has a rhythm. First comes the quiet expectation. It'll be perfect if. Then comes the event itself, messy and unpredictable. And finally, the soft thud of disappointment. It's rarely catastrophic, more like the fizz in a soda going flat. You smile, you nod, but inside, you're mourning the version of events that never made it to the stage. You've probably seen this play out in small ways. You imagine sleeping in on your day off, but your upstairs neighbor chooses that exact morning to test drive a tap dance routine. You order the perfect coffee, but the barista gives you a lukewarm one and a smile that says, "Close enough." Each little mismatch chips away at the glossy version you'd rehearsed. And then there are the bigger moments, the trips that don't live up to the brochure in your head, the conversations that don't deliver the catharsis you pictured. Maybe you finally work up the courage to share something vulnerable, expecting a warm, cinematic hug in return. and instead you get a distracted "oh wow" before the subject changes. That gap between what you expected and what actually happened, that's the cycle's favorite feeding ground. What's sneaky is how your brain uses this pattern to justify itself. See, it says, we needed to set expectations so we could be prepared. But really, the high expectations create a higher drop. And the more often you feel that drop, the more you start preloading events with even more expectations. As if getting the details just right will finally force the world to comply. It's not that imagining outcomes is bad, it's human. Your mind loves a good preview reel. The trouble comes when those previews harden into blueprints. Because the truth is, life is an improv show, and the set is made of cardboard. You can't make the clouds part on cue, or ensure that every punchline lands exactly on beat. And sometimes, the ad-lib version is actually better. But your brain's too busy sulking over the missed script to notice. There's a certain comfort in daydreaming about the should-be version. You get to feel the joy of a perfect moment without risking the awkwardness of its real-life counterpart. But here's the little prank the cycle plays. The more vivid your imagined scene, the more it steals from the actual one. You're sitting at the real dinner table, but half your attention is mourning the version where the candles were taller and the bread was warm. Sometimes you even start shaping your behavior to push reality toward your mental script. You drop hints, you adjust your tone, you arrange the chairs just so. And then, when things still refuse to match, the disappointment feels sharper. Like a magician revealing the trick before the rabbit appears. The cycle loops because disappointment breeds new expectations. After something falls flat, you tell yourself, next time, I'll plan better. I'll control more variables. You upgrade your script writing, only to be met with the same improvisational reality. And with each loop, you become a slightly grumpier director of a film the actors don't even know they're in. The irony. Some of your happiest moments probably came when you weren't expecting anything at all. You just stumbled into them. A song playing from a passing car, a stranger holding a door, a sunset sneaking up on you while you were busy doing something else. No script, no setup. Just life catching you off guard in the best way. But the cycle trains you to overlook these unplanned treasures in favor of the big moments that must go according to plan. If the overthinking loop was a hamster wheel, the expectation-disappointment cycle is a treadmill with a mischievous tilt. You keep walking, convinced you're heading toward the perfect scene, only to find that you've been going nowhere, except maybe slightly uphill in uncomfortable shoes. And yet, part of you clings to it, because hope, even fragile expectation-shaped hope, feels better than nothing. So you keep building little movie sets in your mind, casting familiar characters, rehearsing their lines, and when the curtain rises, you brace for either applause or that quiet sigh only you can hear. Here, in the gentle dimness, you can feel that cycle slowing, like a carousel winding down. You don't have to rip up your mental scripts entirely. Just maybe, let the next one be a sketch instead of a screenplay. The actors will thank you, and reality, it might just surprise you with a plot twist worth keeping. From expectations and disappointments, you slide almost without noticing into the rumination spiral, where thoughts don't just loop, they dig. Imagine a record player stuck on a single note, the needle scratching deeper with each pass. What started as a faint sound is now carving a groove into your mind, and you can feel the edges catching every time you try to move on. It begins innocently. Something small happens. A comment in a meeting. A glance you weren't sure how to read. Maybe you tripped on the sidewalk and did that little pretend jog like it was all part of your fitness plan. No big deal, right? Except your brain saves the file, tags it urgent, and queues it up for the endless replay list. The first replay is almost accurate. You see the moment again, the words, the tone, the look. But then, like a movie on its third remake, things start changing. Lines are delivered with sharper edges. Pauses grow longer. Background details you never noticed before are suddenly suspicious. Was that laugh directed at you? Did they mean something else entirely? The original scene fades under a growing stack of director's cut versions, each a little more dramatic than the last. Rumination is a strange beast. It convinces you that the more you turn something over in your mind, the closer you'll get to the truth. But really, you're just sanding it down until it doesn't even resemble the original moment. Like rewriting a diary entry every day until the ink is unrecognizable, and the spiral doesn't care about your schedule. You could be in the grocery store, scanning for ripe avocados, and suddenly, bam, you're back in that conversation from last Tuesday. Your hand hovers in the produce aisle, but your mind is 3 days and 5 versions deep in the scene, adding imaginary reactions you wish you'd said. Here's the dangerous comfort. Rumination feels active. You think you're solving something, untangling the knot, finding the lesson. But the more you handle it, the tighter it gets. And unlike overthinking, which can wander between topics, rumination tends to fixate. It sets up camp in one tiny patch of mental ground and builds a whole civilization there. Sometimes, you try to get clever and reframe the moment, giving yourself a heroic speech or a witty comeback. It feels good for a second, like winning an argument in a dream. But then the spiral tugs you back to the original hurt, and you start the whole sequence again. You might even notice your mood sinking, but the spiral's logic says, don't stop now. We're so close to understanding. Spoiler, you're not. In the quiet before sleep, the spiral is especially persuasive. It tells you, just think this through one more time, then you'll rest. But the one more time is never one more time. It's like agreeing to just one more episode at midnight. Suddenly it's 2 a.m. and the credits are still rolling. The thing about rumination is it blurs the line between memory and imagination. You're no longer just recalling what happened. You're co-writing it with your worries. That imaginary smirk someone might have given you becomes part of the memory until you couldn't fact-check it if you tried. And yet, the emotions you feel are real. Your heart doesn't know the difference between a factual insult and a fictional one. Sometimes rumination turns into an excavation project. You start with one small event, then dig into every similar thing that's ever happened to you. That awkward hello at the coffee shop leads to that time in high school when you misheard someone's name, which leads to that argument years ago that you still don't fully understand. The spiral links them together like beads on a string, and suddenly, it's not just about Tuesday anymore. It's about your entire life story. There's an odd satisfaction in tracing the spiral, like following a trail of breadcrumbs back through your personal history. But the problem is, the trail loops back on itself. There's no exit sign, no final aha moment that lets you put it down. You're walking a perfect circle, convinced you're covering new ground. Occasionally, you get a glimpse outside the spiral. Maybe someone says something that breaks your focus, or you notice the smell of rain through an open window. For a heartbeat, you're here, not in the replay, but the spiral waits patiently. It knows you'll be back because you haven't found closure. The irony, of course, is that closure doesn't come from replaying. It comes from letting go. And letting go is exactly what the spiral teaches you to resist. If the expectation-disappointment cycle was a mismatched film script, the rumination spiral is the blooper reel you can't stop watching, even though the jokes stopped being funny hours ago. It keeps pulling you in, promising that the next replay will finally make sense of it all. And you, loyal audience member, keep watching. Because what if it does? In the soft, drowsy quiet, you can almost feel the spiral slowing. Not because you've solved anything, but because the mind tires eventually, like a child who's worn themselves out mid-tantrum. For now, you just let the scene blur. Not fixed, not erased. Just resting in the dark, waiting for a morning that might not care about Tuesday at all. From the spiral, you ease into the self-improvement trap. That shimmering mirage where every horizon looks like the finish line until you get there and realize, oh, this is just the starting point for the next lap. Out here, the air smells faintly of new notebooks, fresh gym shoes, and the optimism of a Monday morning. It feels good, like the first page of a planner you swear you're going to keep up with this time. It starts with the thrill of momentum. You sign up for the class, buy the course, bookmark the article about 10 habits that will change your life. You're not just moving, you're transforming. And at first, the progress is intoxicating. You can practically hear the soundtrack swelling behind you as you tick off your daily goals. The new skill is coming along, your desk is organized, your sleep schedule is behaving. This, you think, is the version of me I was always meant to be. But the trap is clever. It waits until you're just getting comfortable with the progress before it moves the goalpost. That language app you've been using for months. Congratulations. Now you should be fluent enough to read poetry in the original text. Those workouts you've been nailing. Time to level up to the advanced plan. No, you can't just enjoy the current one. Improvement, the trap whispers, is not a place you arrive. It's a treadmill you're supposed to keep running forever. And that's where the fatigue seeps in. At first, you thought you were chasing a summit, but now it's starting to feel like the summit keeps politely stepping back every time you approach. You tell yourself, you're not doing enough, not reading enough, not meditating enough, not optimizing your breakfast routine enough. And even when you're doing all of those things, the voice says, sure, but could you be doing them better? Here's the strange thing. The self-improvement trap often feels like virtue. Who's going to tell you it's bad to want to grow, to be better, to make the most of your time? But growth isn't the problem. It's the chronic dissatisfaction that sneaks in alongside it. You can't sit with a victory for more than a day before you're reaching for the next milestone. Rest starts to feel like regression, and regression feels like failure. You start measuring yourself by invisible standards. Maybe it's not enough to learn to cook. Now you should be meal prepping gourmet lunches for the week. Maybe it's not enough to run a few miles. You should be training for a marathon. The trap takes every accomplishment and reframes it as a warm-up act for the real work, which is always still ahead. Sometimes it's subtle. You finish a project you're proud of, and instead of savoring it, you immediately start researching how to scale this. Or you try a mindfulness practice for a week, and instead of enjoying the small pockets of calm it gives you, you're Googling how to meditate like a monk by day 8. The goalpost moves so quietly you barely notice. And because the trap is powered by your own ambition, it can masquerade as inspiration. You see someone else doing more, faster, better, and instead of feeling joy for them, you feel the quiet pinch of inadequacy. The comparison isn't always conscious. Sometimes it's just a whisper that says, see, there's further to go. The fatigue of the trap isn't just physical, it's emotional. you start to lose the sense of why you wanted to improve in the first place. Was it to feel lighter in your body, to enjoy a hobby, to connect more deeply with others? Somewhere along the way, those reasons get buried under progress charts and daily streaks. The thing you wanted to feel gets replaced by the chase itself. It's not that you can't ever grow without falling into the trap. The trick is in recognizing when growth stops being a choice and starts being an obligation. When the idea of enough slips out of reach. Improvement without contentment is just another form of self-punishment, dressed up in motivational quotes. If the rumination spiral is a record stuck on repeat, the self-improvement trap is a game that never lets you win, but still keeps flashing one more level on the screen. And you keep playing, because maybe the next level will finally be the one that feels complete. There are moments when you glimpse the way out. You hit a milestone and for a second you think, I could stop here. The air feels lighter, your shoulders drop, but then the trap leans in and says, why stop now when you could be even better? And just like that, you're tightening your shoelaces for the next lap. Tonight, you let yourself imagine what it would be like to step off the treadmill entirely. Not forever, but long enough to look around, to see where you are, to realize that some of the things you wanted so badly months ago, you have them now. They're here, quietly waiting to be enjoyed. And maybe, just for tonight, that's enough. From the chase of self-improvement, you slip straight into the control chaos loop. The mental tug of war where you grip life so tightly that the effort itself starts to shake the whole structure. In this space, everything feels like it's on a dimmer switch you're constantly adjusting. Too bright, too dark, too loud, too quiet. Because somewhere in the back of your mind, you believe that if you get the settings just right, nothing bad can happen. It starts innocently enough. You like things to be predictable. You make the plan, you set the reminders, you check the weather 3 times before heading out. There's comfort in knowing what's coming. But comfort quietly becomes responsibility. If something goes wrong, it must mean you didn't control enough variables, so you add more. More checklists, more backups, more scenarios rehearsed in your head. Here's where the loop kicks in. The tighter you try to control things, the more you notice all the tiny pieces you can't control. The driver in the next lane, the tone in someone's voice, the sudden rain on your picnic. And instead of feeling safe, you feel more anxious, because now you've mapped every possible crack in the plan. You can almost hear the ticking of a clock you didn't know you were winding. It's a strange paradox. The very tools you use to reduce chaos start generating it. That extra research before making a decision, it opens 10 new questions you didn't have before, double-checking your work. Suddenly you're on the 3rd round of edits, wondering if you missed something in round 1. What started as an attempt to feel steady becomes an endless balancing act over a net you keep tightening yourself. And here's the mischievous part. Every time you successfully control an outcome, it feels like proof that control works. You planned the perfect commute, avoided traffic, arrived on time. Great. But now the loop whispers, see, you need to do this for everything. And so, you widen your control zone until it covers not just your schedule, but other people's reactions, future events, even the weather, none of which ever agreed to be managed by you. The chaos side of the loop doesn't just happen when something goes wrong. It happens when you anticipate that something might go wrong. That little twinge in your stomach when a plan starts to shift, when someone doesn't text back as quickly as usual, when you spot a potential obstacle 2 weeks away. That's your mind running fire drills before there's even smoke. Sometimes you can feel the loop in your body, the shoulders creeping upward, the jaw tightening, the constant scanning of the environment for anything out of place. And yet, you tell yourself it's worth it, because this vigilance is what keeps things from falling apart. But here's the tricky truth. Life doesn't actually collapse when you loosen your grip. Often, the collapse you fear is just the release of tension you've been holding. When control is working, it feels like steering a calm boat across smooth water. But when the loop turns against you, it's like rowing furiously against a current, exhausting yourself, yet still feeling like you're drifting off course. And then, when you can't maintain the pace, chaos takes the wheel. You might have a day where everything goes wrong at once. A missed call, a late train, a coffee spill. And the frustration isn't just about the events themselves, but about the fact that you couldn't stop them. It's worth noting that chaos isn't always the villain here. Sometimes it's the unexpected turn that brings a bit of magic. The unplanned conversation, the detour that leads to a better view. But when you're deep in the loop, chaos doesn't look like magic. It looks like danger. And that's why the loop keeps cycling. Because every brush with chaos makes you double down on control. The loop loves to remind you of past moments when things went off the rails, as if to say, see, this is why we have to be ready. And so you prep and prep again, building a fortress, a plan so tall you can't see beyond the walls. The irony? The fortress isn't protecting you from the world, it's keeping you from living in it. Sometimes the way out is so simple it feels suspicious. You stop adjusting the dimmer. You let the light be what it is, the sound be as it is, the weather do what it wants. You watch as life continues without your constant tuning, maybe a little messier, maybe a little slower, but still moving forward. And in that small act, the loop loosens. If the self-improvement trap was a treadmill, the control chaos loop is a seesaw you keep trying to freeze in perfect balance. But the seesaw isn't meant to stay still. It's meant to move. And maybe, just maybe, you don't have to keep your hands on it all the time. Tonight, you let yourself imagine the comfort of not steering for a while. The boat drifts, the air is calm, and the chaos you fear doesn't come crashing in. Instead, there's just the gentle sound of water lapping against the hull, steady and unconcerned. From the delicate seesaw of control and chaos, you wander right into the productivity addiction. That restless itch that tells you your value is directly proportional to how much you can get done before bedtime. The air here smells faintly of coffee, highlighters, and whatever scented candle you've convinced yourself makes you focus mode, more efficient. It starts with good intentions. You've got tasks, deadlines, dreams. You want to make the most of your time. You jot down the to-do list, color-code it, maybe even add little motivational doodles in the margins. You're ready to conquer the day. And when you tick off the first few boxes, it feels amazing. Like stacking tiny trophies in your mind. But productivity is a sneaky charmer. It claps you on the back for your progress while whispering that you could always do more. That quick break you take after finishing a project, the voice says, you could use this time to get ahead on tomorrow. That slow walk outside, you could answer emails on your phone while you do this. Before you know it, rest is no longer rest. It's just a softer form of work. And here's the kicker. The more you produce, the higher your baseline becomes. Last week's big win becomes this week's bare minimum. If you managed 10 tasks yesterday, then today has to be at least 11 to feel equally satisfying. It's like an internal quota that keeps inflating, no matter how much you deliver. The addiction part comes in when stopping feels wrong. You finally reach the end of the workday. the sun's dipping, your shoulders ache, but there's a hum in your brain that says, we're not done yet. It's not urgency anymore. It's habit. You're so used to running that standing still feels unnatural. And when you do stop, there's that faint, guilty itch, as if idleness is a crack in the armor. Sometimes it's even worse on weekends. You tell yourself, I'll relax today, but relaxation comes with a side of, I should at least clean the kitchen, reorganize the bookshelf, catch up on laundry, and prep meals for the week. By mid-afternoon, you realize you've just built another to-do list in disguise. The strange thing is, productivity used to be about creating space. You worked hard so you could enjoy the fruits of that work. But somewhere along the way, the fruits became irrelevant. You're picking apples only to plant more trees, never stopping to taste one. And because the addiction is fueled by praise, both from yourself and others, it reinforces itself. People say, I don't know how you do it all. And instead of thinking, maybe I should slow down, you think, better keep it up. That little dopamine hit from accomplishment becomes the currency you run on, even when the bank is running low. The real cost isn't just physical exhaustion, though that's there in the tight muscles, the tired eyes, the creeping brain fog. The deeper cost is that joy gets postponed. You tell yourself you'll relax after the list is done, but the list regenerates faster than you can finish it. Rest becomes this mythical event scheduled for later, a later that never really arrives. And when you finally do crash, it's not the peaceful rest you were chasing. It's the collapse that happens when the battery hits zero. You fall into bed or onto the couch, too tired to enjoy the downtime. Your mind still buzzing with the faint hum of things left undone. If the control chaos loop was a seesaw, the productivity addiction is a hamster wheel. It gives you the illusion of movement while keeping you in the same spot. And the wheel never stops spinning. It just waits for you to climb back on. There's a small rebellion in stepping off, even for a little while. It can feel uncomfortable, like breaking a streak on purpose. But that discomfort is often just the withdrawal from constant motion, not proof that you're falling behind. In reality, the world doesn't collapse when you rest. Deadlines shift, tasks wait. The list can live without you for a day. The most dangerous part of productivity addiction is how quietly it blends into the background. It's not dramatic like a crisis. It's just the slow erasure of unstructured time. The afternoons you used to spend daydreaming, the evenings where nothing happened except watching the light change, they get paved over with busyness, and you don't notice until you try to remember the last time you felt truly unrushed. Tonight, you imagine what it would feel like to set the list down and walk away, to let the wheel spin without you, to reclaim a moment not because it's earned, but because it exists. The air is still, the candle's flame sways gently, and for once, there's no scoreboard ticking in your head. From the restless hum of productivity, you drift into the identity reinforcement loop, the slow, quiet pattern of living, according to the version of you that other people recognize, rather than the one you might actually be. The air here feels strangely staged, like a room set up for a photo shoot. Everything just so, because someone might be watching. It starts early, this loop. You figure out which parts of you get applause, which ones earn the smile, the nod, the "that's so you." You collect those moments like trophies and put them on display. And before you realize it, they start shaping the way you move through the world. You keep playing the role that gets the best reviews, because the alternative, stepping out of character, feels risky. Sometimes the loop is subtle. You're the responsible one. so you keep saying yes to tasks even when you're tired. You're the funny one, so you find a joke, even when you'd rather sit quietly. You're the chill one, so you swallow your irritation, because it wouldn't fit the brand. You're not faking exactly. It's more like living inside a costume you forgot to take off. The loop thrives on consistency. The more people respond to this curated version of you, the more you feel obligated to keep it up. If you're known for being the adventurous friend, you can't just say no to the last-minute trip without feeling like you've broken some unwritten contract. If you're the organized one, you can't let your desk get messy without feeling a tiny shiver of guilt. Here's the tricky part. The loop doesn't just control how others see you. It starts to control how you see yourself. You begin editing your own thoughts to match the character. If you're the confident one, you downplay your moments of insecurity, even in your own head. If you're the nurturing one, you convince yourself you're fine with always being the listener, even when you're craving someone to ask about you. And when you do break character, even in small ways, it can feel disorienting, not just for others, but for you. Someone says, "That's not like you." And suddenly you're wondering, wait, what is like me? The loop resists these questions because they threaten the neat, predictable identity it's built. It's not all bad, of course. Having an identity gives you stability, something to lean on in unfamiliar situations. But the loop becomes a trap when the identity stops being a reflection of who you are and starts being a performance you maintain out of habit. It's like living in a house where you've sealed off all the rooms, except the one you know gets compliments from guests. Sometimes the loop feels almost protective. If people see only the approved version of you, they can't reject the parts you keep hidden. But that safety comes at a cost. The hidden parts never get sunlight, never get tested in the real world. They remain fragile, unpracticed, quietly aching to exist. You might even find yourself seeking situations that reinforce the identity because they make you feel solid. If you're the smart one, you volunteer for tasks that prove it. If you're the dependable one, you step in to fix things, even when no one asked. Each time you do, the loop nods approvingly, stamping your identity card for another year. The danger is that life changes, but identities tend to resist change. Maybe you don't want to be the life of the party anymore. Maybe you'd rather be the person who leaves early and watches the moon rise on the drive home. But the loop tugs you back toward what's familiar, because familiar is safe, and safe is easy to explain to others. If the productivity addiction was a hamster wheel, the identity reinforcement loop is a stage play with no closing night. You keep hitting your marks, saying your lines, and the audience keeps clapping. And the applause, though warm, is also the cue that you're still inside the role. The small acts of rebellion here are quiet ones. Letting your voice be flat when you're not feeling the joke. Admitting you don't know when people expect you to have the answer. Saying no even when you can think of 100 reasons to say yes. At first, these moments feel like dropped props, but slowly, they start to feel like fresh air. Tonight, you let the role rest. No curtain calls, no audience, no reviews. Just you, without the costume, sitting in a room that doesn't have to impress anyone. And maybe, in that stillness, you catch a glimpse of a different script, one where the main character is allowed to change. From the quiet stage of identity, you step into the shadows of the emotional avoidance cycle. That strange hallway where feelings you've tried to bury keep slipping little notes under the door. The air here feels still, but it's the kind of stillness that hums, like the pause before a summer storm. It starts with a small discomfort, maybe sadness, maybe anger, Maybe a mix you can't name. And instead of letting it pass through, you tuck it away. Not now, you tell it. You've got things to do. Maybe later. But later rarely comes. Because when you do peek at the feeling, it's grown sharper, heavier, more complicated than before. Avoidance feels logical in the moment. You tell yourself, if I don't think about it, it'll fade. Sometimes you even distract yourself so well that you believe it's gone. You work longer hours. You fill your evenings with noise. You clean the kitchen like the sink itself holds the cure. And for a while, it seems to work. But the cycle has patience. What you push down doesn't dissolve. It waits. And while it waits, it grows. A little resentment you don't express turns into a subtle distance from a friend. A small sadness you ignore becomes a heavy fog you can't quite name. You think you're avoiding pain, but really, you're just letting it set up camp underground. The problem is, emotions are like water. They find cracks. You can seal the front door, but they'll seep in through the window frames, the floorboards, the places you didn't even know were open. A song on the radio, a smell from childhood, a random comment from a stranger. Suddenly the feeling you've been dodging is right there, uninvited and stronger than ever. And when it does show up, it's rarely polite. Suppressed feelings often return with interest, sharper, louder, and tangled up with other things they picked up while hiding. That little sting of embarrassment from a month ago comes back wrapped in every similar sting you've ever felt, until it's not about this moment anymore. It's about all of them at once. Avoidance tricks you into thinking you're in control. You believe you're choosing not to engage with the feeling, but really, the feeling is choosing when to engage with you. And because it's been locked away so long, you're often less prepared to handle it when it bursts through. Sometimes, the cycle makes you fearful of even approaching certain emotions. You avoid situations, people, or conversations, not because they're dangerous, but because they might stir something you don't want to face. Your life starts shrinking around the edges, the map of your world redrawn to exclude the places where the feelings live. There's also the risk of emotional spillover. You're avoiding anger at one thing, but it leaks out sideways at something unrelated. You're suppressing sadness, but it shows up as irritation or even exhaustion. It's like pressing down on a water balloon. The shape changes, but the pressure's still there, waiting for a weak spot. If the identity reinforcement loop was a stage play, the emotional avoidance cycle is a locked storage room in the theater's basement. You tell yourself it's too messy to open now. You'll deal with it later. But the longer it stays locked, the more it starts influencing the show upstairs, whether you like it or not. Breaking the cycle doesn't mean throwing the door wide open and letting everything spill at once. Sometimes it's as small as cracking it an inch, letting yourself feel a flicker of frustration without immediately shoving it away, or admitting to yourself that you're lonely before you try to distract it out of existence. It's noticing when you're reaching for the noise, the phone, the work, the chore, and pausing just long enough to ask, what am I avoiding? The cycle is hard to spot because it's so quiet. You can go months thinking you're fine, only to have one small thing pull the thread and unravel everything you've tucked away. And yet, in those moments, there's also an opening, a chance to finally hear what that buried feeling has been trying to say all along. Tonight, you don't have to fling the door open. Just acknowledge it's there. Picture the room, feel the weight behind it, and know that you can choose when and how to let the light in. And maybe, for the first time in a while, that choice feels less like a threat and more like a promise. From the dim hallway of unspoken feelings, You step into the narrative trap, a cozy but oddly confining room lined with shelves of well-worn storybooks. Each one is a story you've told yourself about who you are, what's happened to you, and what it all means. The air smells like old paper and nostalgia, the kind that's warm at first, but eventually starts to feel a little stale. It begins with a single event, something that hurt, something that surprised you, something that stuck. You turn it over in your mind, shaping it into a neat little tale. Maybe you became the shy kid, the unlucky one, the one who always gets left behind. You tell the story enough times, in your own head, and maybe out loud, until it feels less like a memory and more like a fact carved in stone. The trap isn't that you remember, it's that you rehearse. Every time you replay a story, you sand away its rough edges, make the timing sharper, the details tidier. And slowly, the story stops being about the actual moment and starts being about the version you've perfected. You could recite it half asleep, which is fitting, because often you do. Sometimes the story is protective. It explains why you are the way you are, giving you a frame to fit inside. This happened, so now I'm this kind of person. It gives meaning to random events and puts a clear label on the box. But the danger is that the label doesn't change, even when you do. You could grow, shift, outgrow the old plot entirely. But the story stays the same, dragging you back into its familiar shape. And familiarity is the trap's greatest lure. Even painful stories can be comforting, in a way, because you know the ending. You know exactly where the sad part lands, where the self-deprecating joke goes, where the audience nods in understanding. New stories are harder, unpredictable, untested. Sometimes you catch yourself bending current events to fit the old script. A minor disappointment becomes, see, this always happens to me. A random win becomes, well, that's rare. I shouldn't expect it again. The story edits reality so it matches the plot. You think you're describing life, but really, the story is deciding what counts as life in the first place. The narrative trap isn't always dramatic. It can be as simple as telling yourself, I'm bad at meeting new people, and then conveniently forgetting the times you've made friends easily. Or believing, I'm the one who never finishes what I start, even though there are dozens of quiet victories you've long since stopped counting. The story edits out the contradictions, leaving only the scenes that support its theme. There's a comfort in having a well-rehearsed identity, just like there's comfort in rewatching a familiar movie. You know the beats, the lines, the music cues. But rewatch it enough times, and you start missing the small moments, the details you once loved. Worse, you start to forget there are other films you could be watching entirely. If the emotional avoidance cycle was a locked storage room, the narrative trap is a library where the door to new books is stuck shut. You keep rereading the same titles, underlining the same passages, telling yourself these are the only ones worth keeping. And after a while, you forget the rest of the shelves even exist. Sometimes the way out is as simple as telling the story differently, not erasing it, but reframing it. Maybe you weren't the unlucky one. Maybe you were the one who kept going despite the odds. Maybe you weren't the shy kid. Maybe you were the one who noticed the things no one else did. Small edits can turn the same plot into a completely different theme. Other times, the escape isn't in rewriting the old story at all. It's in setting it down, letting it gather dust while you live something new, something you don't narrate to yourself immediately. You experience it without deciding what it means yet, without fitting it into a familiar arc. The hardest part is resisting the urge to keep the story alive through retelling. there's a part of you that wants to hold on to it, because if you let it go, you might lose a piece of yourself. But maybe that piece was never the whole picture. Maybe it was just one chapter in a much bigger book. Tonight, you let the library be quiet. You run your hand along the spines of the familiar titles, but you don't take any down. Somewhere beyond the stuck door, there are shelves you haven't seen yet. And maybe, without forcing it, the door will start to loosen on its own. From the quiet library of old stories, you step into the belief confirmation spiral, a place where the walls are lined with mirrors, but each one bends the reflection just enough to match what you already expect to see. The air here is clear but filtered, letting in only the light you've pre-approved. It starts with a single belief, maybe about yourself, maybe about the world. I'm not good at this. People can't be trusted. Good things don't last. You don't always remember where the belief came from, but you know how it feels. Solid, familiar, and strangely comforting, even when it's limiting. From there, the spiral does the rest. Your mind starts scanning for evidence to support the belief, and, surprised, it finds it. Not because the evidence is everywhere, but because you've tuned your attention to it like a radio station. If your belief is, I'm unlucky, you'll notice every missed train, every flat tire, every bad weather day, and quietly file them away as proof. The sunny days, the moments when luck bends your way, they slip past uncounted, like commercials you fast forward through. The spiral's trick is that it feels like observation, not bias. You think you're simply reporting the facts. This is how it always goes. But really, you're editing the facts to fit the headline you've already written. And the more you do it, the more convinced you are that the headline is true. This happens in small ways. You believe you're not creative, so you shrug off the clever solutions you come up with, chalking them up to luck or accident. You believe people don't really listen, so when someone forgets a detail you shared, you treat it as confirmation. But when they remember, you call it an exception. It also happens in bigger, more stubborn ways. You believe you're destined to fail at relationships, so you notice every awkward silence, every mismatch in values, but overlook the small moments of connection that could rewrite the narrative. Or you believe the world is hostile, so you remember every rude encounter and forget the strangers who held doors, gave directions, or smiled at you in passing. The spiral reinforces itself because every piece of evidence feels like validation. It's satisfying in a way, the comfort of being right about your view of the world. And the longer the spiral runs, the harder it is to imagine a reality where the belief isn't true. In fact, the idea of changing the belief can feel like a threat, as if you'd have to admit you've been wrong all along. And yet, the spiral isn't airtight. Every now and then something slips through, a moment that doesn't match the belief. Someone surprises you with kindness when you were expecting indifference. You succeed at something you thought you couldn't do. For a heartbeat, the mirror shows a different angle. But if you're deep in the spiral, you brush it off, calling it a fluke. And just like that, the old reflection snaps back into place. If the narrative trap was a library of old stories, the belief confirmation spiral is a gallery where the paintings keep rearranging themselves to flatter your assumptions. You walk the halls, nodding at each frame, convinced the art is simply what's real. You forget that you're the curator here, and the walls are full of blank spaces you've never hung anything on. Escaping the spiral doesn't mean tearing down every belief. It starts with noticing the small, inconvenient moments that don't fit, the evidence you'd usually dismiss. You let them sit there, unedited, and resist the urge to make them match. Slowly, the mirrors start showing more angles, more light. It can feel disorienting at first, seeing yourself or the world in a way that doesn't line up with the old picture. But disorientation is just the space between beliefs, the quiet stretch where you're not sure what's true yet. And in that space, new possibilities have room to grow. Tonight, you don't have to smash any mirrors. Just stand still in the gallery and notice the reflections you've been avoiding. Let them stay in view, even if they don't make sense yet. Somewhere in the stillness, you might catch a glimpse of a version of you, or a version of the world you've never let yourself believe in before. And so, as the tense cycle fades, you're left with a quiet thread running through them all. The loops, spirals, and traps your mind builds to keep itself busy, safe, certain. But here, in the hush before sleep, you see them for what they are. Patterns you can step into and out of, not prisons without doors. The fan hums softly, the air feels steady, and your mind begins to loosen its grip. Whatever cycles wait for you tomorrow, they can wait until morning. Sweet dreams.